All right, so let's dive into this question that I'm sure we've all thought about at some point. Can men and women really be just friends?
Right.
You sent in this pretty amazing collection of opinions from a Reddit forum,
Mm-hmm.
all from men.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like we get to peek inside the minds of guys and how they see this age-old question.
And what's so fascinating is the variety of opinions. Like some of these men are just like, no way attraction will always get in the way,
Yeah.
while others are talking about how much they value the deep friendships that they have with women. And it's not just all theoretical either. We're getting real stories, worries about relationships, and even some pretty funny moments.
Okay, so let's break this down.
Okay.
A lot of these guys are saying it's biology, like it's just built into us to be attracted to each other.
Mm,
So like pure platonic friendships are basically a myth.
right.
One guy even said men are like monkeys in suits,
Okay.
basically saying those primal instincts are always there under the surface.
Yeah, that's a pretty strong image. And I think it gets at this fear that some men seem to have that like no matter how much they value a friendship,
Yeah,
those like basic urges could always just mess things up.
totally.
Yeah.
And it's not just about basic attraction either.
No.
A bunch of these men said they want a partner who's basically a best friend with benefits.
Oh, interesting.
They're kind of blurring the lines between friendship and what they want romantically.
That is really interesting. It makes you think, are they looking for a partner who is also their best friend? Or are they looking for a best friend that they can also be romantic with?
Yeah,
I mean, can those two things even really exist at the same time without one taking over?
that's a good question.
Yeah.
And, one guy's story really stuck with me. He was talking about falling in love with his close female friend.
Hmm.
He didn't mean for it to happen, but their connection and the way they cared for each other, it just kind of became something more.
Yeah, and that just highlights how feelings aren't static, right? They
Right.
can totally change within a friendship, even catch us by surprise.
For sure. And this leads to another thing that some of the men brought up, the fear of messing things up by saying they have romantic feelings.
Oh, yeah.
They'd rather not say anything than risk losing the friendship.
That's a tough situation to be in.
It is. It makes you think, can it really be a real friendship if someone's always holding back their true feelings?
Right. Like, is there a lack of honesty there?
Exactly. This whole dilemma gets right to the heart of why these relationships are so tricky.
Yeah.
How do you balance being honest with keeping a connection that you value?
It's a tough one.
Here's where things get interesting. Some guys pointed out what they see as a double standard.
Okay.
They feel like when a woman falls for a guy friend, it's seen as sweet or romantic.
All right.
But if a guy says he has feelings for a female friend, people are suspicious, like he has ulterior motives.
Yeah, and that's a really important thing to point out because it says something about how we view men and women differently.
Right.
It's like there's this assumption that men always want something more, which makes genuine platonic connections seem almost impossible.
Okay, so let's talk about pressure. Things got pretty intense when the conversation shifted to how romantic relationships impact these friendships.
Yeah.
Lots of guys said their friendships with women changed after they got married.
Mm-hmm.
A lot because their partners felt uncomfortable or they wanted to put their relationship first.
Right, and that really highlights how important communication and boundaries are
Yeah.
in all relationships.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, partners need to feel secure,
Sure.
but friends also need to feel respected.
Totally.
Yeah.
So what stood out to you and how these men talked about that shift in their friendships?
Mm-hmm. Anything surprise you?
It seemed like it was way harder for some of these guys to stay friends with women once they were in committed relationships.
Yeah.
It was almost like they had to pick a side.
Yeah, it definitely shows that finding a balance is something you have to keep working at.
Right.
It's not just about setting those boundaries at the beginning.
Yeah.
It's about talking and adapting as things change.
And we can't forget, not every guy felt this way.
Yeah, that's true.
We also heard from guys who are really proud of the platonic friendships they have with women.
That's great.
They talked about respect, shared interests, clear boundaries as like the key ingredients for these connections.
And those examples are so important because they challenge that idea that men and women just can't be friends.
For sure.
Like, it's just impossible.
This has been so interesting already. We've seen how biology, what society expects, the ups and downs of relationships all play a part in this question. And we've only just scratched the surface. We were talking about how tough it can be for these guys to balance friendships with women and their romantic relationships.
That's right.
But something else that really hit me was how many of them talked about communication problems between men and women.
Yeah, that's a big part of it, isn't it?
Like a lot of these men said they felt like they had to be so careful around their female friends,
Oh, really?
worried about saying the wrong thing or having their words taken the wrong way.
Mm.
They said it was like they could be straight up with their guy friends, but with women they had to be way more careful.
Oh, wow.
Like they were speaking totally different languages.
And then on the other side, some of the men were frustrated that women wouldn't just be direct with them.
Yeah, I saw that.
They said they wished women would just say how they felt, whether it was romantic or not, instead of sending all these, like, subtle signals.
Right. So basically both sides felt misunderstood.
Exactly.
No wonder there's so much confusion and hurt feelings.
And it shows just how important clear communication and empathy are
Absolutely.
in any relationship, but especially when it comes to men and women.
Yeah.
It's about knowing that we don't always see things the same way.
Right.
And being willing to have those hard conversations,
Yeah.
even if it's uncomfortable, to try and bridge that gap.
One guy said something that really got me thinking. He pointed out that for a lot of men, what they look for in a friend is the same stuff they look for in a partner.
Oh.
So it's easy to see how things can get messy if they're already close to a woman and like spending time with her.
Yeah, that's a great point. It makes you think maybe friendship and romantic attraction aren't always so separate.
Right?
Like maybe those feelings can grow naturally as a friendship gets deeper. It really makes you wonder, can you even have purely platonic feelings
Yeah.
once you have that kind of connection?
That's the question. And it's not just about how individuals feel.
Right.
Society's expectations add another whole layer of complexity.
Absolutely. There's this huge expectation that men should be the ones to make the first move when it comes to romance.
Yeah.
So even if a guy really values being friends with a woman, he might feel like he has to make a move.
Totally.
Just because that's what he's supposed to do.
Then there's that whole friend zone thing
Ah, yeah.
that so many of these guys brought up. They felt like once a woman puts a guy in the friend zone,
Right.
it's like game over, even if his feelings change.
And the friend zone is such a loaded term.
Yeah, it is.
And I think it often shows this power dynamic
Yeah.
where men think they're entitled to a woman's romantic interest just because they've been nice to her.
Right. Like being friendly means she owes him something.
Yeah, it completely ignores the woman's choice and her right to choose who she wants to be with romantically.
This takes us back to that double standard we talked about earlier.
Sure.
It seems like men are often given more freedom to say they're interested,
Yeah.
even within a friendship, while women are expected to be more passive.
It's a good reminder that these dynamics are so deep in our culture
Right.
that it can be really hard for men and women to connect just as friends.
And then there's the big one, jealousy and possessiveness.
Oh boy, here we go.
And not just from the guys themselves, but from their partners too.
Yeah, things get complicated fast.
A lot of guys admitted to feeling jealous when their female friends started dating other guys, even if they weren't romantically interested themselves.
Right, like they weren't trying to date her.
Exactly. They described it as feeling possessive, like they had some claim on their friend's time and attention.
And that possessiveness can come from their partners, too.
Oh, yeah. For
A lot of the men shared stories about their wives or girlfriends being suspicious or uncomfortable about their friendships with other women,
Yeah.
and that led to all kinds of conflict and tension.
So it sounds like making these relationships work takes a lot of trust and open communication.
Yeah.
Not just between the friends, but also within their romantic relationships.
You got it. It's about recognizing that boundaries and expectations might need to change as relationships evolve. So what are your thoughts on how jealousy plays into all of this?
It's definitely powerful.
Yeah.
It usually comes from feeling insecure or scared of losing someone.
Right.
I think the key is to recognize those feelings and talk about them in a healthy way
Yeah.
instead of letting them control you.
Well said. And it's about understanding that all healthy relationships, romantic or platonic, need trust and respect.
Absolutely. We even heard from some guys who said they stopped being friends with women after getting married,
Wow, really?
often to avoid conflict or to show respect for their wives.
That's pretty extreme. It makes you wonder if they really valued those friendships in the first place,
Yeah.
or if they just saw them as a threat
Right.
to their romantic relationship instead of as something separate.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This just shows how crucial communication is.
Yeah, for sure.
If someone's partner isn't comfortable with their friendships with other women,
Right.
it's so important to talk about it honestly
Yeah.
instead of just cutting those friends out completely.
And the key is finding that balance that works for everyone.
Mm-hmm.
It might mean seeing those friends less often
Right.
or changing what you do together.
Yeah.
But it shouldn't mean ending those friendships altogether.
As we wrap up this part of our deep dive,
Yeah,
I'm curious what's been sticking with you the most.
I know, right?
Yeah.
We've covered so much. From biology and societal pressures to the emotional roller coaster of these
For
relationships.
sure. What are your thoughts? So we've spent the last two parts really digging into all the problems men run into when it comes to having platonic friendships with women.
Yeah.
But before we wrap up, I think we need to change gears a bit.
Okay.
We've talked a lot about what can go wrong.
Right.
But what about the guys who are proving that it can actually work?
Yeah, that's a great point. We can learn from them.
What can we learn from them?
Exactly.
What I noticed is these men didn't seem to have the same anxieties as some of the others.
Okay.
They said respect, shared interests, clear boundaries. Those were like the most important things for building these connections.
That makes sense.
It was really good to hear.
It's like they've figured it out,
Right.
right? They've managed to deal with all those potential problems, the attraction, the jealousy, the societal pressure,
Yeah.
without letting it ruin their friendships.
It shows that even though biology and social norms might make us lean a certain way,
Yeah.
we're not stuck.
We can choose how we relate to each other.
Exactly.
And those choices can go against what's expected.
Yeah. And those stories are so powerful to hear
They are.
because they prove that you can have close friendships with people of the opposite gender
Mm-hmm.
without it automatically turning romantic.
It gives me hope.
Me too.
And it's worth pointing out that a lot of these successful platonic friendships seem to have a few things in common.
Like what?
Well, a lot of these men said they'd known their female friends for a really long time, often since they were kids or teenagers.
That makes sense. Building that friendship early on,
Yeah.
before romantic feelings usually come into play,
Right.
seems to set them up for a purely platonic connection.
Exactly. Like they've already built that trust and respect.
And another thing they had in common was shared interests.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
These friendships weren't just because they lived near each other or it was convenient.
Mm-hmm.
It was a real connection that went beyond just surface level attraction.
They talked about having the same hobbies, having deep conversations, just really enjoying being around each other without it having to be romantic.
Yeah.
It was about the connection itself, not what it could lead to.
Exactly. And maybe most importantly, these friendships had open and honest communication.
Yes, they weren't afraid to talk about anything awkward or confusing directly. They were clear about what they wanted and what they expected, and they created a space where both people felt safe and respected.
It just shows how important communication is for any relationship,
It does.
whether it's with a friend, family, or a romantic partner.
Absolutely.
So after going through all of this, what does it all mean?
That's the question.
I think the biggest lesson is that there's no easy answer to whether men and women can really be just friends.
You're totally right. It's complicated, and there are so many things that influence it. Biology, what society expects, personal experiences, how we communicate.
Yeah, in the end, it's up to you.
Right.
You get to choose what kind of relationships you want in your life, and you decide what friendship means to you.
And if you're open to being friends with people of the opposite gender, just be aware of the challenges.
Yeah.
Communicate, be honest. Don't be afraid to set boundaries.
And if you start having romantic feelings for a friend, be honest with yourself and with them.
Right.
Sometimes you can work through those feelings and stay friends, and sometimes it turns into something more.
The important thing is to approach these relationships with respect, empathy, and an open mind.
Absolutely. Life is all about discovering new things.
It is.
And our relationships are such a big part of that journey. Embrace the complexity.
Yeah.
And never stop learning.
This deep dive has been so interesting.
It has.
But the conversation doesn't have to stop here. What are your thoughts?
Yeah. What experiences have shaped how you see this question?
We'd love to hear what you think.